AFP. As you've no doubt gathered, I've been experimenting in these early pages of my book of disquiet by addressing these missives, Job-like you could say, to a kind of God. Simone Weil's God, broadly speaking. The only one that has ever really made sense to me. A God defined not by presence, but by a kind of implacable absence. A refusal to talk back, to respond. Which of course also resembles that God from which we all issue forth, the nothing and everything that is, and to which we all inevitably return, the great unplug, glug, glug. Goodbye Internet, goodbye YouTube, Pornhub, The Guardian, Spotify, all life's content, every single letter and pixel of it, gone, all gone. But I've also noticed after a few weeks of God bothering that I still seem to be looking upwards when I boot a few thoughts in that direction, as if the void that is God resided somewhere above our heads, up there in the clouds. And where else, I guess, would a loving and unloving emptiness hang out, muttering and weeping, as it seems to do over the Atlantic, sending us on the island its wind-whipped tantrums, so as to remind these islanders who live beneath its skirts who is ultimately in charge. Ananke, necessity, God. But when I turn to you, FP, I picture something nearer, more corporeal than that. For you once lived, as I do, adrift in your own lonesome word arrangements. You are like La Boétie was to Montaigne, or Shams of Tabriz to Rumi, the soulmate who died but still continues to live through the material you captured for your jute sack, the somewhat raw spillage, we might say, the shit, if you like, of your soul, pressed into words and packed into sentences before it could vanish forever. I read that your remains were dug up in 1985, 50 years after your death, so that you could be reinterred with much pomp and circumstance in the fancy schmancy monastery of Geronimo. The intervening decades appear to have promoted you from obscurity to the rank of national treasure. That is why they lifted you from your first anonymous resting place in the Cementerio dos Prazeres, where you'd been buried as a negligible nebbish, little more than an interesting footnote in Portuguese literary history, and had you reinterred in the cloister of Jeronimos, your once private disquiet, recast at that moment as civic pride, the sober-appearing pisshead, becomes the conscience of a nation, embalmed in national marble, patron saint of Lisboa melancholia. Perhaps I share, when it comes to UFP, the same hunger that once drove believers to traffic in the bones and garments of saints, in the blood-stiffened veils of earthly martyrs, those dubious splinters of the true cross hawked in ancient markets and bazaars, the innumerable scattered teeth of the apostles, even the foreskin of Christ himself. Imagine fishing a foreskin out of the refuse after the mohel's done his bit, maybe even your own decapitated flesh, drying it in the sun, and then trying to flog it off for something that once nestled between the thighs of Yeshua of Nazareth, the carpenter's son with his big ideas and even loftier words about having a hotline to his sky father. Faith by purchase or collective prayer, this consumer-led longing for proximity to the divine, is no doubt the same impulse that drives me now to hoard every book written by or about you, to buy and rebuy your once upon a time thoughts in print. For you are canonical to me, FP, in a way that few writers ever could be, even though I have only read a quarter, maybe even less, of everything you once wrote. I spoke in my last missive to you about my parasocial connection to Mark Will, who calls us the Gemini Pig brothers, born the same year, same month, with Enneagram configurations like mirror images. He's 854 to my 458. I told Mark I'd written a song for the 4th track of the album that he imagined we might make together, and I sent him a link to the last video on here about the Enneagram, hoping he might listen, perhaps, to the words that I'd written in the episode before hearing the track itself, since it circled themes that interest him. As to be expected, Mark went straight to the end of the episode, listened to a few bars of the song, skipping all the writing that preceded it, which I had hoped might speak to him in some way. It's the parasocial imbalance that does this, I think. My written content means very little to Mark. Our ties are negligible, impersonal, circumstantially driven. I don't even know what he does in Taiwan for a living. I've asked. He's never told me. Mark is a mystery to me, and that is, I think, how he likes to keep it. Perhaps he's ashamed of what he does out there to pay for his keep. Perhaps he only wants me to see the mind that writes, not the middle-aged expat living in Asia for its women and its lifestyle drifting towards death in a foreign city like some Thomas Mann character. I have, if I'm honest, a closer relationship to you, FP, than with Mark, and you are dead. I find this strange. Not that you are dead, but that there is little I can do to make Mark love me. But there is much that I can do so as to engender a bit of this feeling, just a little bit, in your heart and soul. Maybe that's how it goes as we age for a certain kind of human animal. Our conversations with the dead start to outnumber and possibly even outshine those we have with the living. Maybe it is that way for Mark as well. I get a sense, Fernando, when I read your book of disquiet, that you have made your peace with being dead, with being read and unread, but mostly unread. That your soulmate reader is, at heart, yourself, or rather, one of the selves within you. Perhaps that's what the heteronyms are all about. Pessoa reads with pleasure and interest the writings of Bernardo Soares. Ricardo Reis holds a flame for Álvaro de Campos. All reading and writing to each other, one part of the self receiving the words of another as a kind of private inner correspondence, familiar yet foreign and intimate. Of course, it's all fundamentally narcissistic, even onanistic if you like, this fantasy and practice of self-encounter, not so different from the adolescent trick of numbing one's own hand just to feel for a moment the touch as other. What to do when there is no one but us to hear our own voice, our thoughts? We are, for the most part, all, I think, living now in this sort of Pessoan echo chamber, a global soliloquy in which each of us performs sincerity to an audience, for the most part, of none. At a certain point in the expressive arts, we invented this strange and relatively new technology of writing, of lining up our most heartfelt human expressions in words on clay, papyrus, paper, asking another to sit quietly and read or listen to those thoughts as if we were indeed present to convey them. I wonder what it is we're really asking from the other when we do this. It isn't that far in structure from what we require of a therapist. 50 or 60 minutes of another sentient being's time and attention, purchased for the purpose of full disclosure, as well as a kind of tender care, someone paid to lean in towards our inner lives and not look away when the content isn't necessarily that edifying, redemptive, or entertaining as we might have hoped it to be. Why would we ask another for this? Why would we offer our inner content to anyone, you could say, unless there were, beneath this offering, one of two gravitational impulses, either a desire that seeks its own likeness, a need that sends us outward in search of what might correspond to it, or else something like a familial allegiance, the soul's version of kin recognition, which is to say, a form of love. Not the transactional kind of use or social barter, but, the big, unpurchasable sort of love. The kind that simply inclines one being towards another without reason. Can we ask this of our parasocial connections? Probably not. Though I love dogs and take them to be the superior species in almost every sense, I cannot love another dog, even the most personal dog that I follow on Instagram or my mother's sweet Shih Tzu companion Shelby, as much as I love Max. Max, who sleeps beside me, Max, whose body presses itself into mine through the night, that old pact between our species reenacted in miniature. We watch over each other, this domesticated little wolf and I, trading warmth for companionship. Such a bond can never exist in a virtual space, and that sucks. To Mark, I am, have been, and will remain only that garrulous fool who surfaces from time to time on his WhatsApp feed, releasing another bout of my chatter, my content, my shit, if you will, is to him what the leavings of other dogs are in the park to me. If you look into the sociological and psychological literature around friendship, summarizing decades of research into what makes this particular social attachment secure and nourishing, it seems to rest on three factors. Factor 1, proximity. Factor 2, repeated content. And factor 3, meaningful self-disclosure. It's interesting, I think, to hold these principles up against the parasocial realm. Proximity, well, maybe, that still holds. Nowadays, the friend is always, in some sense, in our hands, that little glowing rectangle always on. Repeated contact, maybe, new uploads, new stories, the illusion of ongoing presence. But meaningful, mutual self-disclosure, that's the missing piece, as well as the essential piece. We trick ourselves into thinking that it's there, mistaking the odd bit of fluff that we might add to the comments section or the friendly responsiveness of an AI chatbot for reciprocity. In truth, these relationships are asymmetrical confessions. One speaks, the other listens for a minute or two, and then vanishes. In all my parasocial ties, Mark included, I know almost nothing of the other people whom I'm interacting with. I ask my questions. I am a curious creature, a nosy creature. I reach out, show interest. But these parasocial connections, by and large, don't self-disclose. This sort of vulnerability is reserved for people who have a shared geography with them, shared time together, history, as well as the daily friction of real life. I will never have that with Mark. Even if we create 100 pieces of content together, him saying stuff about stuff and me saying stuff about stuff in response to his stuff about stuff, it'll always just be more of the same blah, blah, blah content without anything really meaningful beneath it all, any soul presence, you could say. And certainly no hope that he might care for my thoughts or ideas in a familiar way, in a brotherly way. All of that is pure fantasy. There is no quid pro quo in the parasocial or the virtual realm. It's all easy come, easy go, projected ego phantoms sending voice notes or text to other projected ego phantoms, substanceless, hollow, but very much replete with God, with Jesus, with Mary, with the Holy Ghost, which is to say, with nothing, Fernando, with nothing and everything, but mostly with nothing. As you know, I've been struggling to leave this island since COVID, FP. In fact, apart from a brief and somewhat senseless trip to LA some years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, to do this acceptance and commitment therapy training there, I haven't really had what some people might call a holiday since Max came into my life 10 years ago. I don't take time off. I wouldn't know what to do with that time, so I don't take it off. Every day is exactly the same as the day before. Today's Groundhog Day, writing, exercise, seeing clients, getting stoned, reading, YouTube, ice cream, going to sleep, will be exactly the same as that of yesterday and tomorrow and the day after that. I can't fly anywhere with Max, and I have no desire to travel to another corner of this island just so as to be able to pay a fellow islander 100 or more pounds per night so as to lay my head on their Airbnb pillow. Recently, though, I have noticed within me a growing desire, or maybe even just a kind of panic, I don't know, to make a pilgrimage of sorts, a pilgrimage in your direction, FP. For where else would I go? GPT has suggested that there might be a route for Max and I to reach Lisbon overland, beginning with a ferry from Plymouth to Santander, northern Spain, 20-hour crossing, something like that, where Max could stay with me in a pet-friendly cabin, then continuing by train south to Madrid, Salamanca and the parched plains of Castile before slipping into Portugal at Entroncamento and then on towards your gaff and resting place in Lisbon. I'm not sure whether I'm going to actually stay in Lisbon itself or take us somewhere quieter, more nature-bound, like Leiria with its pine forests, which sounds wonderful, or Pinhal Novo, just north of the capital. What would you suggest, FP? Lisbon, I guess. You were never much of a country boy, were you? Your alter ego, Bernardo Suarez, spends a night in the countryside and describes the peace of it all as, quote, weighing on him, hurting him. The artificial has come to seem natural to me, he writes, and the natural strange. How very proto-Baudrillard of Bernardo Suarez, FP. For me, you write, or he writes, you write, plural, no flowers can match the endlessly varied colours of Lisbon in the sunlight. Really? Spoken, I would say, like a true urban bon viveur and, as well as, semi-functional pisshead Fernando. We are nothing but our words. I recently bought the complete works of your heteronym, Álvaro de Campos, the New Directions volume that came out in 2023, and this morning read a poem from there, which you wrote in 1916. The poem begins, I carry inside my heart, as if in a coffer too full to close, all the places I've ever been to, all the ports I've ever arrived in, all the landscapes seen through windows or portholes, or while dreaming on a ship's deck, and all this, which seems so much, is too little for my wants. You address these wants, or rather these yearnings for what remains unfulfilled in you, the moral obligations you cannot or will not meet, in an invocation to night, which I think is also to say, to death. Make me human, O night, you write. Make me fraternal and solicitous. One can only live in a humanitarian way, only by loving mankind, action, the banality of work. That, alas, is the only way one can live. That, O night, is the only way. And I cannot be like that. And because you cannot be like that, FP, because we cannot be like that, we pray, don't we? As I am praying here to you. Here's how you end your prayer or your poem. You, whose coming is so gentle that it resembles a departure, whose ebb and flow of darkness, when the moon exhales, contains waves of dead affection, cold as a sea of dreams, breezes from landscapes fashioned to calm our excess of anxiety. You, palely, you, feebly, you, liquidly, or in the form of a numbing vapour, the smell of death among flowers, the whiff of fever on riverbanks, you the queen, you the chatelaine, you the pale lady, come.
When are you gonna come down? When are you going to land? I should have stayed on the farm, should have listened to my old man. You know you can't hold me forever, didn't sign up with you. I'm not a present for your friends to open. This boy's too young to be singing the blues. So goodbye, yellow brick road, where the dogs of society howl. You can't plant me in your penthouse. I'm going back to my plow, back to the howling old owl in the woods, hunting